presenter today. Kia Ellis is a senior national curriculum specialist with McGraw-Hill Education. She has been in education for over 20 years, 10 years as an inclusion classroom teacher, and 11 years with us at McGraw-Hill Education. We're so excited to have her with us today to share with you this powerful session on gaining the most from your Fluency Checkouts. So without further ado, I'll be turning it over to Kia here in a moment. And I just wanted to, again, welcome everybody. And Kia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jeff. And welcome and good afternoon to Gaining the Most from Fluency Checkouts with Reading Mastery. Today's webinar, we're going to focus in on fluency. A great topic, exciting topic, and we know that fluency is very important, so we'll start the webinar with discussing why it's important. We will then take a look at the fluency checkouts that are offered in Reading Mastery at all levels, and then take a look at the procedures and how the procedure to give a fluency checkout in Reading Mastery occurs. And lastly, we'll take a minute to talk about remedies for those students who struggle with fluency and have a hard time gaining fluency progress. But before we get started, I just love this quote because I think it really talks a lot about fluency and how we should practice, especially towards in Reading Mastery Signature Edition. Practice makes permanent. Perfect practice makes perfect. How students get their practice matters as much as how much practice they get. And that really is very important because we want students to practice perfectly, and how they practice fluency really has a direct correlation on how well they would do in fluency and toward that progress of great fluency. So I would like to ask you guys a question, and Jeff's going to launch a poll in a minute. Just a question about fluency and where we are with our fourth graders in fluency as a nation. Jeff?
Thank you, Kia. First question we have today for our webinar is, what percentage of our nation's fourth graders lack the fluency necessary to comprehend grade level text? Is it 25%, 45%, or 75%? Please take a moment and select your choice. This just gives something to think about as we think about our fourth graders in fluency. 85% of the way there. A few more people. We'll wait a couple more seconds to give everyone a chance to vote. And we will show our results right now. Here are the results, Kia. About 8% of the folks thought it was 25%, 67% thought it was 45%, and 25% thought it was 75%.
This is a smart group. You're absolutely correct. 45% is the correct answer. So we know we still have some work to do with our fourth graders and some of our other students when we're talking about fluency and their progress. You're thinking about riding a bike. If you don't ride a bike fast enough, you fall off. Well, the same could really be said about fluency. Think about the speed of fluency as the same as the comprehension. Without good, fluent reading, then you really fall off on the comprehension end. So we're going to talk about why that is so important, because fluency really is one of the things that is important that we teach students, especially at the elementary age. One of the reasons that makes fluency so important is it is one of the best predictors of overall reading success. We think about all the things we talk about in reading and how to get students to be successful. Fluency is one of the best predictors that can predict how well students will do in reading overall. And you know we need fluency first. We need to have readers acquire that before they can use reading as a tool. And we want students to not just recognize words and know what the word says, we want to build comprehension with reading. And so really understand that fluency is like that link or that bridge to comprehension. You have to have it in order for students to have comprehension. We don't want just students to be able to know what the word says, we want them to know what the text actually means. And so current standards today still tell us that it's important. And so we know that we have to keep teaching fluency because it's important. It's a key skill that we teach to students, especially at that elementary age. And one of the things that's important about the standards that we all know that rate's important. We've been working with rate for decades. But what current standards let us know is that accuracy is as important as rate. And I want to talk about that one specifically because in Reading Mastery Signature Edition, we really focus in on accuracy and rate. We know they're just equally as important to one another in order for a student to become a fluent reader and to really have great comprehension, which that's what fluent readers lead to. People often ask, well, how accurate is accurate? In Reading Mastery Signature Edition, the criteria is pretty much at a certain percentage. And that percentage is actually 95%, and that's what we want for students. That percentage rate, that accuracy rate, lets us know that students are going to be fluent and that they can spend more time on comprehension and less time on worrying about what the word actually says. So those are some of the reasons why we know reading fluency is important and why we think it's very important and a key piece in Reading Mastery Signature Edition. But why do we measure it? We often wonder, well, we're doing fluency, we're measuring, why is that so important? Well, what we know about measuring fluency is that it's important because students need to have positive feedback. And what fluency does, monitoring that student progress, it gives the students feedback. It also gives the teacher feedback. It also encourages and motivates students. So we measure fluency because we know it's important to give students that feedback. We can't really know what needs to be done if we don't measure it. So it's like we go to the doctor or we take random medicine without really knowing what the problem is. Fluency is the same way. We have to know what needs to be done so we can do that work for them and help the kids and measure it and get them moving on to a great fluency progress. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about what fluency looks like in reading mastery. We know it's important because we start measuring fluency at the kindergarten level in reading mastery. We start the fluency checkouts in kindergarten at lesson 108. So if you're a kindergarten reading mastery teacher, you're going to notice that your first checkout will be at lesson 108 after the students have acquired a lot of skills. You'll see 3 consecutive fluency checkouts, and then they'll begin every 5th lesson. Students will then use their student materials for these fluency checkouts. It'll be their storybooks in level K, their story readers in level 1, and at level 1, we'll actually begin fluency pretty much right away, every 5th lesson, starting at lesson 5. If you have access to the curriculum-based assessment and Fluency Teacher Handbook, you can also find those fluency passages here. So you can also use those. They're a little bit easier to use than maybe the student materials. What I want to also emphasize is that the outcomes of Reading Mastery Signature Fluency Measures really are aligned with all of those fluency norms that you see out there. Hasbrook and Tyndall's chart, Dibble's, Ames-Webb's. Those criteria that we're asking students to acquire while doing the fluency measures are aligned with those outside measures, and students will be ready for those outside measures that you're working with in your schools and your districts. So I don't want you to think that they're not ready. They are ready if they are using reading mastery at their grade level. When we get to levels 2 and 3, we are going to actually start doing measured fluency every 5th lesson starting at lesson 15, but it looks a little different in their student book. So as students are going to use their student book for the fluency checkouts, you're going to notice that they're going to have a mark in their book to where they should begin reading to where they should stop. That mark is a flower. So students will begin at the flower and then read to the next flower for their fluency checkouts in levels 2 and 3. You'll also see the mark there at levels 4 and 5, and we spend our fluency checkouts actually last every 10 lessons, but starting at lesson 11 and levels 4 and 5. So Reading Mastery Signature, we do fluency checkouts at all levels because we know it's important to measure students, to provide them that great feedback on how they're doing in their fluency progress, and also to make sure we're continuing to encourage and motivate students. Teachers often ask me, okay, I know we have checkouts in Reading Mastery Signature. I know I'm supposed to do them, but where am I supposed to record those results? So let's find out if you know where those results should be recorded. Jeff, can you launch the second poll about where they should record results for fluency checkouts?
Absolutely. Here's question 2. Where can you record your fluency results? Is it the curriculum-based assessment and Fluency Teacher Handbook? Is it the teacher's guide? Or is it on the To-Inform online progress monitoring? Or is it all of the above? Please take a moment and select your choice. We're about halfway there. Give it a few more seconds, see what we're thinking. I'll do another 5 seconds, a few more folks get their answers in. And here are the results, Kia. We have 7% at the curriculum-based and Fluency Teacher Handbook. No one said the teacher's guide, 13% said To-Inform, and 80% said all of the above.
I know this is a smart group. Excellent. So you can find the actual checkout forms in a lot of the ones that you just mentioned. In the teacher guide and former editions of Reading Mastery, the curriculum-based assessment, Fluency Teacher Handbook, and if you're utilizing the digital resource of To Inform, which was our online data management system, you can actually record them there. Let's talk a little bit about just the actual procedures and the mechanics of actually performing a Fluency Checkout in Reading Mastery Signature Edition. What you're looking at here is those charts that you're going to use to record the student's fluency. Where you can find those charts are in the curriculum-based assessment book, To Inform. And these charts are important because this is where you're going to record students' rate as well as their accuracy on these charts. You'll need obviously a pencil and a pen to make sure that you're recording accurately, and then you're going to actually follow the following steps to the fluency procedure. Pick a designated place in your classroom where it's a little bit quieter, but you can still see your other students. Sit next to your students so you can hear them pretty clearly and they can hear you in the directions. Tell the student when to begin and where to begin if they're going to be using their student book that has the flowered markings. Remember, that's important for the grades 2 and above. Start the timer. Observe the text. Mark on the tally on the recording form. And then take note of when the time of the student finishes. One of the important pieces here is to make sure that you are recording the students accurately, listening to them, and then providing them feedback when it finishes. Let's take a look at an actual fluency checkout being given to a student so we can see an example of a teacher using these procedures with the student in Reading Mastery Signature Edition. Notice when you look at the video where the student is sitting, where the teacher is sitting, is the teacher responding and talking to the students, giving them feedback, so you can see an actual fluency checkout being done.
Susie, today you're going to do your reading checkout, and you'll be reading from this flower to this flower, and you have a minute to read it. Just read as well as you can, okay? Let me get your name on the paper and today's date. And are you ready? All right, you may begin.
This trick didn't work because the other words always caught the words from the back row. Hey, you can't move up here. They would say, go back to the last row where you belong. So the said,
that word is said,
words would sit and wait and hope. Once in a while, somebody would say their names and they would feel very good. They tried to remember how good they felt. Sometimes they would talk about it. The word run.
that word is runner.
Like to say, I remember one day when my name was said 4 times in one day. The other sad word.
So as you noticed in that video, you did see a teacher and student using the procedures for fluency checkouts. The teacher was sitting closer to the student was reading. What was wonderful about that checkout is the teacher was providing immediate feedback. After the students finish their fluency checkout, you want to go ahead and fill out their rate and accuracy chart. The one that you're looking at right now, you want to make sure that you're filling out the student's time over their errors. And it's important to make sure we note the rate, the time, but remember we're talking about accuracy is as important. What's great about this chart is that you can look at students and see how they're progressing in their fluency, so you can look at an individual student over a long period of time. You could take a look at your group as a whole and see how they're progressing by using this chart and recording your results. But you also can take a look at this chart just in case you needed to do some regrouping of your groups. You can take a look at this chart, and the time could be one of the things that you look at, one of the measures, one of the criteria to say, you know what, this student really should be moved in a different group that moves a little faster, or this student should be moved in a different group that moves a little slower. So recording those fluency results really gives you an opportunity to monitor students' progress, provide them some really great feedback, but also for you as the teacher to see their growth as a student or as a class or group. So recording those results are very important. If you're utilizing in To And 3, the thermometer chart. This is available for levels 2 and 3. Students will actually have their own opportunity to record their results and to watch their fluency and to see their progress. If they meet the criteria of the Fluency Checkout for the very first time, they would go ahead and color it red. If they did not meet their fluency criteria the very first time, then they would go ahead and color it a different color. On this particular example, you see that the student would have colored it yellow. They can choose any color if they did not pass on the first attempt. This is a great way for students to monitor their own fluency progress. I'm sure it's wonderful for parents to see as well. So recording those results, remember, provides immediate feedback for students and provides motivation and engagement. If you're utilizing the digital resources to inform our data online management system, then you can go ahead and input fluency score. You would input their time as well as their errors, and then to inform would graph those results for you. What you're looking at is a group fluency progress. This lets me know if this was my class, Reading Mastery 2, how they're performing as a group in fluency. I could see their progression as a group. You can drill down to the student if you want to see how a student is performing. Just by clicking individual reports and clicking on fluency, you can see how an individual student is performing in fluency. You can see their individual progress compared to the group average and to compare it to the entire group. So it's a great way to look at the results, inform what you want to do next for the student. One of the things that often happens is that we sometimes have students that struggle with fluency and we need to firm them up. One of the things that's important is that we should be talking to our students during fluency checkouts. It should not be a student comes to you, they read to you, you record how they did, and they go back to their seats. You should have a conversation with them, so share their results with them so that way they understand how they're progressing in their fluency. Tell them the words that they missed, like we saw in the video. And if for some reason the criteria is not met, then assign the passage to the student and have them study that passage, and then reassess them on the same passage until the criteria is achieved. It is important that they only study the passage if the criteria is not met. They should not study the passage prior to fluency checkouts. The only time we would assign that to students if they need to have some firming up for their fluency, and we had to reassess them. But I don't know about you, but every once in a while you'll get students who just consecutively fail the fluency checkouts more than once, more than twice. And they need more than just a quick firming. They need some remedies, some more intervention with fluency. And one of the best ways to practice fluency is to practice oral reading, a lot of additional practice. So I'm going to share with you some things you can do during your lesson and then some things that you can do outside of your lesson. One of the things that's really great that you can do during your lesson is repeated readings. So having students have additional practice with the same reading over a period of time. Always providing them immediate feedback when the error occurs, giving them information on what they did correctly as well as their errors. You can also monitor their paired practice during paired practice time. And then when it comes to individual turns for that particular student, in subsequent lessons, you can call on them more often. So that's some of the things that you can do during a lesson if the student is failing fluency checkouts consecutively. But outside the lesson is also another way to help a student. And one of those things is we know listening to a good model of fluent reader is important, but we need the student to read out loud every day to practice. So the repeated reading practice is the same text. It's at their instructional or independent level so we can ensure that they can read this passage fluently, and then providing them still with immediate feedback. Now, the immediate feedback could come from a parent, a paraprofessional, whoever is giving them this additional outside reading for them to practice. I'm going to share with you how a teacher used repeated readings as an assignment to do at home for students who needed some additional practice with fluency. So here you're looking at a copy of a fluency passage that a student read. You'll see that where they should have started with a flower and ended with a flower. And then you'll see below how the teacher has assigned this as a repeated reading, which is a great strategy to help with students who are struggling. The students read the same passage every day or every night for homework, record their time and their errors. And one of the reasons why we want them to read those same passages is because we want them to get more fluent with words so that way it becomes automatic for them. And the more they practice with this passage, the better they become, the more confidence they have, and the more that they have opportunities to reach that criteria. So repeated readings is a great strategy to actually use for when students are struggling with reading to assigned to a student either during class or outside of the lesson. So I always love hearing about some of the things that you guys are doing in your classrooms for remedies that are working for you, that you've tried, that are really great ideas. So if you want to share some of those ideas, please feel free to type those in. Or if you have a question, please feel free to actually type in your question about remedies or about anything that we're talking about today having to do with fluency. So we often have other questions, and because of time, we can't answer every question, but these are some of the top 5 that I hear often. So these are some of the frequently asked questions that we hear about fluency concerning Reading Mastery Signature Edition. So where do I record the fluency results? I hope we answered that question, that you record them on the sheets that are provided for you, either in your curriculum based assessment book, or if you have to inform, you can record them on there, or if you have an older edition, they're in your teacher's guide. What if I have a large class size? Now I always joke, this never happens to anybody. We always have perfect class sizes, but we know that's not necessarily the case. When you have a large class size, it can seem overwhelming sometimes to get all those students in. So know that it may take you 2 days to get through your fluency checkouts, and that's okay. But make sure to start with your students who are struggling a little bit with fluency, because if they don't meet the criteria, then you have an opportunity to, remember, assign them the passage again. They can study it, and then you can actually reassess them the second day. So it's a great strategy if you have a large class size to actually start with the students that may struggle and then end with the students that are not struggling with fluency. We get a question about DIBELS and how does it correlate. So McGraw-Hill Education doesn't necessarily correlate Reading Mastery Signature Edition with DIBELS, but what I will assure you is that it is aligned with the criteria of those DIBELS, Ames-Webb, Hasbrook and Tyndall chart, all of those fluency norms that you think of, Reading Mastery Signature Edition criteria does align with that. If your students are a grade 1 student and they're using grade 1 Reading Mastery, they will be fine on all of those fluency norms that you're doing, whether it's DIBELS or Ames, but they will be just fine and do very well. The criteria for Reading Mastery Signature Edition is reliable, and it will definitely allow your students to be successful. What do I do with a student who never passes? I'm a firm believer in really providing them with those higher remedies, not just firming them, giving them lots of opportunities for repeated readings at their own instructional or independent level, and providing them lots and lots of feedback. This last question is probably a question we get often. Why do we measure students' fluency on a passage previously read? So we do measure students' fluency on a passage that they have read the day before. And that is because that students have a little bit of experience with that passage. It's not a cold read, but it's not really a hot read either, because during the reading of that passage, we have called on individual students to read a few sentences at a time, but they've never read the whole passage out loud by themselves. So it really is a warm read. So I do want to assure you that we took all of those things in consideration when we thought about the criteria for Reading Mastery's fluency checkouts. We took all of those things into consideration. So the goal is for students to be successful when they're reading, but they have not necessarily read the entire passage. So it's more of a warm read, not necessarily a hot read. So I hope I've answered some of the frequently asked questions that come up a lot about fluency when concerning with Reading Mastery Signature Edition. We do have still a few minutes, but we do have one more poll we'd like to ask you before we end this afternoon. But are there any questions that we have that we can answer before we do our last poll?
Mary, do you have some questions out there?
Yes, I do, and please feel free to type in any additional questions or suggestions that you have for fluency, as Kia mentioned. So Kia, I'll start with the first one, and you touched on this, but just to hit it again, it was a question about progress monitoring with Ames-Webb, which, as we know, is similar to DIBELS, and how well it correlates with Ames-Webb.
Thank you, Mary. That's a great question. So remember that the expected outcomes that we want for students in Reading Mastery they are aligned with fluency norms like Ames-Webb or DIBELS. And so we don't necessarily correlate to them, but they are aligned with them. So if students are at grade level and using reading mastery at the level that grade level they're in, they will be just fine on Ames-Webb. And those other fluency norms, they will be ready to meet those norms that they are being expected of in Ames-Webb or DIBELS or other measurements. So the reading mastery fluency checkout measures are reliable, and they will align to those outside measures.
Okay. Second question, how do you keep the checkouts from causing student anxiety and therefore possibly skewing the results and not getting a really accurate view of how they're reading?
I mean, I think this is a very real-life question, because we do have some students that get nervous when we ask them to read aloud or they see that timer being pulled out. One of the best ways to sort of relieve anxiety for students is really to have those procedures as structured and as routine, and really making sure you're having conversations with the students about what you're doing, why you're doing it, and why is it important. And then really making sure, if you know you have a student that has anxiety, to just prep them. So just remind them, remember tomorrow's Fluency Checkouts, we're going to do some checkouts and read out loud, so that way they feel prepared and they know what's coming. So I do know that happens, but really having a conversation and constant communication, and then really routine and structured procedures in place to relieve as much anxiety for the students.
Okay, thanks, Kia. And
thank you.
Yeah, so the next question of the chat was about students who are well over the time limit for the checkouts. They're okay in fluency but have a lot of difficulty, and they're well over the time allotted.
So they're having a lot of difficulty. Their rate is poor. Is that what?
Yes, the rate's very poor, especially compared to accuracy.
So we've seen students over many times having difficulty coming in with the rate. The goal really is for fluency to get better at fluency is practice, oral reading, very structured, repeated readings. Remember, making sure that the text is the same for the student over maybe 5 days. That is at their instructional or independent level, to give them more confidence, and that you're providing them with feedback. The student should be seeing progress within what they're capable of doing, so you should see it their rate start to come down over a period of time. But remember, it just takes practice in a very structured way for them to eventually gain accuracy as well as rate. So just be patient. It doesn't happen overnight, but it will happen if you really provide them with those great remedies and interventions for fluency. So I know that Jeff has one more poll, but before he does, I just want to say that I hope today we sort of covered how fluency really is so important and a key skill to teach students, and to provide them really consistent procedures, and to talk to them. I mean, just talking to the students about fluency checkouts, during checkouts, after checkouts, it really does help improve their results and gives them a lot more confidence and motivates them to continue to read. I know that Jeff has another poll about if you're interested in joining a direct instruction community. So I'm going to let him launch that poll. And we love hearing about what you learned today or what you liked today on Facebook. So please make a comment. We love seeing everyone make comments after we have these webinars. Jeff?
Excellent. Thank you, Kia. Great job. Okay, I do this. If some of our questions didn't get answered, don't worry. We will respond to your questions after the webinar within 24 hours. But I am excited to announce today that we are launching a DI virtual learning community. And if this is something you think you might be interested in finding a place where you can share ideas and ask questions and learn from each other, please go ahead and click yes, and I can send you information. If it's no, that's fine. Just click no. Or if you're just not sure and you want some more information, go ahead and click that box too, and I'll send you some information. We're just trying to give you all more ways to communicate with each other, to share ideas, and to share your love for meeting the needs of the students you're working with. So, please take a moment, let us know what you think. And as you're doing that, I do want to, again, thank you all for spending the time with us this evening, or this afternoon, depending where you're at. We do hope this was a helpful webinar for you. Hope you learned something you can use immediately in your classroom. You will be getting an email tomorrow The email will be a follow-up. It'll give you a link to view this recorded presentation. It will also give you a link to download a copy of what Kia shared with you today, so maybe you can share with other teachers. We're also excited to share that next month we'll be beginning the final 2 webinars in our webinar series. April the 15th on Tax Day, we're going to begin our 2-part series on closing out the school year. And then on May 13th, we'll have the second of that 2-part series closing out the school year. We want to make sure we give you all the resources, tips, and tools necessary to make sure you're able to close the school year out very successfully and start the next school year on a positive note. So with that, we do thank you again for joining us. We do hope you found this helpful. And you will also, there's a survey when you exit. And we do hope you take a moment just to answer 3 or 4 questions and let us know what you thought of today's session, if there's anything we can do to help you, but also to let us know if you need a certificate. Some people are saving these days as a certificate of attendance. And if you need that, just click the box that says, yes, I need one, and we'll send that to you. And finally, if you have any other feedback, please feel free to email me, jeff.omer@mheducation.com, and I'd be happy to get back to you with any feedback or ideas you have for future webinars. And with that, I will say thank you so much for joining us, and everyone have a great afternoon and evening.